Healing Hearts begins when rural veterinarian Maya Winters unknowingly rescues an injured hiker who turns out to be reclusive tech billionaire Ethan Blackwood, a man whose emotional scars run deeper than his physical ones. Her selfless care slowly melts the ice around his heart, proving that sometimes the wealthiest people are the poorest in spirit. Before we dive into their story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Winters pulled her weathered pickup truck into the small parking area of her veterinary clinic, the morning fog still clinging to the ground in the quiet mountain town of Pine Ridge. At 35, she had built a life that felt purposeful, if not glamorous, caring for the animals of this close-knit community nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. The clinic, a converted farmhouse with wide porches and welcoming rocking chairs, matched her personality, unpretentious, warm, and dedicated to healing. She gathered her coffee thermos and the bag of fresh pastries she'd picked up from Maggie's bakery. It was Thursday, which meant staff meeting with her small team before the day's appointments began. The October air was crisp, making her pull her knitted cardigan tighter as she fumbled with her keys at the back door. The sound stopped her. A low moan, almost indistinguishable from the morning breeze rustling through the pines. Maya paused, her keys suspended midair. "Hello?" she called, turning toward the wooded area that bordered her property. "Is someone there?" Another groan, this time unmistakable. Maya set down her things and moved toward the tree line, the damp grass soaking through her sensible shoes. 20 yards into the woods, she found him, a man propped against a massive oak tree, his hiking clothes torn and bloodied, a makeshift tourniquet wrapped around his thigh. "Oh my God," Maya rushed forward, her medical training kicking in immediately. "What happened? How long have you been out here?" The man's eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue against his dirt-smudged face. He looked to be in his early 40s, with several days' worth of stubble and dark hair that might have been neatly styled before whatever ordeal had befallen him. "Fell. Ravine," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Tried to make it to town." Maya assessed him quickly. The wound on his leg wasn't life-threatening, but he was dehydrated and likely hypothermic after what must have been at least one night exposed to the elements. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." His hand shot out, surprisingly strong as it gripped her wrist. "No hospitals." "No. Attention." Maya frowned. "Sir, you need medical attention." "You're a doctor," he said, eyeing the veterinary logo on her jacket. "For animals," Maya clarified. "I'm a veterinarian." "Same. Principles." His eyes were clearer now, intense as they held hers. "Please." Something in his gaze, desperation mingled with what looked like genuine fear, made Maya hesitate. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "I can help with the wound and get you stabilized, but if you need more than that, I'm calling an ambulance, whether you like it or not." Relief crossed his face before pain replaced it. "Deal." It took all of Maya's strength to help the tall stranger to his feet. With his arm draped heavily across her shoulders, they made their way slowly to the clinic's back entrance. By the time they reached the door, they were both breathing hard, and Maya could feel the man's strength failing. "Just a few more steps," she encouraged, guiding him through the treatment area to an exam room where she helped him onto the table. Under the bright lights, she could see him more clearly. Even disheveled, there was something refined about his features, something that spoke of a life very different from Pine Ridge. "I'm Maya Winters," she said, cutting away the makeshift bandage to examine the wound beneath. "Do you have a name, or should I just call you Mystery Hiker?" The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Ethan," he said after a moment's hesitation. "Ethan. Blake." Maya noted the pause but didn't comment. "Well, Ethan Blake, you're lucky. The cut is deep but clean. I can stitch it up, but you've lost blood and you're dehydrated. You really should see a proper doctor." "You are a proper doctor," he insisted, wincing as she cleaned the wound. "Just with a different clientele." Maya shook her head but continued working. As she prepared to stitch the wound, her assistant, Jenny, arrived for the day, clearly startled to find her boss treating a human patient. "Should I cancel the morning appointments?" Jenny asked, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "No, I'll handle this quickly," Maya assured her. "But could you bring me the emergency kit from my office? The one with my personal supplies." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Jenny left, Ethan studied Maya. "You keep emergency supplies for humans at a vet clinic?" "I live 30 minutes outside of town on a small farm," Maya explained, pulling on surgical gloves. "When you're that isolated, you learn to be prepared for anything. Now, this will sting." Ethan barely flinched as she injected a local anesthetic, his eyes never leaving her face. There was something unnervingly intense about his gaze, as if he were cataloging every detail of her movements. "You're good at this," he observed as she began stitching with practiced efficiency. "Animals can't tell you what's wrong," Maya replied, focused on her work. "Makes you extra observant. Plus, I volunteered with search and rescue for 5 years. Picked up some human first aid skills along the way." "Lucky me," Ethan murmured. By the time Maya finished the last stitch, Jenny had returned with supplies and word that their first patient, a golden retriever with an ear infection, had arrived. "Go ahead and get them set up in room 2, Maya instructed. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Once they were alone again, Maya handed Ethan antibiotics, painkillers, and a bottle of water. "These will help with infection and pain. You need rest and fluids." She paused, assessing his still pale complexion. "And you shouldn't be alone for at least 24 hours. Do you have someone I can call?" Ethan shook his head. "I was hiking alone. My cabin is about 5 miles up the mountain." Maya frowned. "You can't possibly hike back in this condition." "I'll manage." The stubborn set of his jaw reminded Maya of some of her more difficult patients, the ones who growled even as she tried to help them. "Don't be ridiculous. You can barely stand." Before Ethan could protest further, Maya made a decision. "You'll come home with me after my last appointment. I have a guest room. 1 night of observation. Then you can go back to your cabin if you're stable." Surprise registered on his face. "You'd take a complete stranger home?" "A stranger I've already treated, and who clearly isn't a threat in his current condition," Maya countered. "Unless you have a better suggestion that doesn't involve a hospital?" For a moment it looked like he might argue, but then exhaustion seemed to overcome him. "No," he admitted reluctantly. "Thank you." Maya nodded briskly. "You can rest here until I'm done for the day. There's a couch in my office. Jenny will check on you periodically, and you are not to leave this building without my knowledge. Clear?" A ghost of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Yes, doctor." Maya spent the day distracted, her thoughts repeatedly returning to the mysterious man resting in her office. During a brief lunch break, she found him asleep on her couch. His face relaxed in a way that made him look younger and somehow vulnerable. Who was he really? And why was he so adamant about avoiding hospitals and attention? By 6 o'clock, she had finished with her last patient, a fractious cat with urinary issues, and returned to find Ethan awake, thumbing through one of her veterinary journals. "Fascinating reading?" she asked, setting down her bag. He looked up, and Maya was struck again by the intensity of his blue eyes. "Actually, yes." The parallel between canine osteoarthritis treatments and human applications is interesting. Most people would have found the novel on the shelf more entertaining, Maya remarked, surprised by his genuine interest. "I'm not most people." The statement wasn't boastful, just matter of fact. "I'm beginning to see that," Maya replied. "Ready to go?" "My farm is about 30 minutes from here." The drive to Maya's home was mostly silent. Ethan seemed content to gaze out the window at the mountain landscape, occasionally closing his eyes as pain or fatigue overcame him. Maya found herself stealing glances at his profile, the straight nose, the strong jawline now covered in stubble, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and stress. Her farmhouse came into view as they rounded the final curve in her long driveway, a two-story white clapboard structure with a wraparound porch, surrounded by fenced pastures and backed by dense forest. It wasn't grand, but it was hers, purchased with years of hard work and careful saving. "This is you?" Ethan asked, taking in the property. "Home sweet home," Maya confirmed, pulling up to the porch. "Just me. 2 horses, a goat with attitude problems, and an ancient cat who thinks he owns the place." "It's beautiful," Ethan said quietly, and something in his tone made Maya look at him sharply. There was a wistfulness there that surprised her. Getting him inside proved challenging. Though he tried to hide it, Ethan was clearly in pain, his face pale and drawn by the time Maya helped him settle on the couch in her living room. The rustic space was comfortable rather than stylish. Overstuffed furniture, bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, and large windows that looked out over the mountains. "I'll get dinner started," Maya said, placing a glass of water and his medication on the coffee table. "Think you can manage some soup and bread?" Ethan nodded, though his attention seemed captured by the room around him, his eyes taking in details with curious intensity. In the kitchen, Maya worked efficiently, warming homemade vegetable soup from her freezer and slicing fresh bread she'd baked the previous weekend. As she cooked, she found herself wondering about her unexpected guest. There was something about him that didn't quite fit. His speech patterns, the quality of his torn hiking clothes, the way he carried himself even when injured. Ethan Blake, if that was his real name, was used to authority, to being listened to. When she returned with 2 steaming bowls, she found him examining a photograph on her mantel, Maya with an older couple in front of the very same farmhouse, all 3 smiling widely. "My parents," she explained, setting down the tray. "That was taken the day I bought this place from them when they decided to retire to Florida." "You grew up here?" Ethan asked, carefully returning the frame to its place. "Born and raised," Maya confirmed, handing him a bowl. "4th-generation Pine Ridge. My great-grandparents built this house." Ethan accepted the soup with a nod of thanks. It's rare these days, that kind of continuity. "Around here, it's not so unusual," Maya said, settling into an armchair across from him. "Pine Ridge is the kind of place where people put down roots. We're a little disconnected from the rush of the outside world, which suits most of us just fine." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the occasional crackle from the small fire Maya had lit to ward off the evening chill. "This is good," Ethan said finally, gesturing to the soup. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Maya studied him over her bowl. "So what brings a man like you to our isolated little corner of the mountains?" "We're not exactly on the typical hiking circuit." Ethan's expression shuddered slightly. "I needed to get away, clear my head." "From what?" "Life." The word held enough weight to discourage further questions, but Maya wasn't easily deterred. "Must be some life, to drive you alone into the wilderness without proper preparation." She nodded toward his leg. "That fall could have killed you." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Would it surprise you to know that wasn't my primary concern at the time?" The quiet admission hung in the air between them. Maya set down her bowl, suddenly understanding the recklessness of his solo hike in a different light. "Actually, no," she said softly. "It wouldn't surprise me at all. I've been there myself." Ethan's eyes snapped to hers, surprise evident in their blue depths. "You?" Maya nodded, her gaze drifting to the window where darkness had settled over the mountains. "After my fiancé died. Car accident, 7 years ago. For a while, I didn't much care what happened to me either." She hadn't meant to share something so personal, but something about Ethan's presence, or perhaps his obvious pain, that went beyond the physical, had drawn the words out. "I'm sorry," he said, and the simple words held genuine empathy. Maya shrugged, turning back to him with a small smile. "Life goes on, whether we want it to or not. Eventually, I remembered there were still things worth living for." "Like what?" The question seemed to escape him involuntarily, as if he genuinely needed to know the answer. "Small things at first," Maya admitted. "The way the sunrise looks over those mountains. The feeling when a sick animal starts to recover under your care. Fresh bread on a cold morning." She gestured around her. This place. The knowledge that I'm continuing something my family built. Being needed in a community where I belong. Ethan was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. You make it sound simple. It is and it isn't, Maya replied. Simple to understand. Harder to feel when you're in that dark place. She stood, gathering their empty bowls. But you didn't come here for amateur philosophy from a country vet. You need rest. The guest room is upstairs, first door on the right. Bathrooms across the hall. I put out towels and some of my dad's old clothes that might fit you. Ethan struggled to his feet, clearly still in pain despite the medication. Thank you, Maya, for all of this. Most people wouldn't have done the same. Most people in Pine Ridge would, she corrected him gently. It's how we are here. She helped him navigate the stairs, acutely aware of his height and the solid strength of his body despite his injury. At the guest room door he paused, turning to her with an unreadable expression. What is it? Maya asked. Ethan seemed to struggle with himself before speaking. My name isn't Blake. It's Blackwood. Ethan Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Maya, and she raised an eyebrow questioningly. You really don't know who I am, do you? He asked, a note of wonder in his voice. Should I? Maya was genuinely confused. For the first time, Ethan laughed. A short, surprised sound that transformed his face. No. No, you shouldn't. And that's refreshing. He shook his head slightly. Good night, Dr. Winters. Maya, she corrected. If you're sleeping in my guest room, we might as well use first names. Maya, he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. Good night. As she turned to go, he called after her softly. Those things you found worth living for, do they still work? Do they still make it worthwhile? Maya paused, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Most days, yes. She answered honestly. Some days are harder than others. But I've never regretted choosing to stick around to find out what comes next. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Not quite hope, but perhaps the ghost of it. Thank you for your honesty. Get some rest, Ethan, Maya said gently. Things have a way of looking different in the morning. Later, as Maya sat on her porch swing with a cup of tea, her ancient tomcat Merlin purring in her lap, she pulled out her phone and hesitated only briefly before typing Ethan Blackwood into the search bar. The results made her nearly drop her mug. Ethan Blackwood, tech billionaire and founder of Blackwood Innovations. Legendary recluse following the death of his wife and daughter in a home invasion 3 years ago. Known for revolutionary advances in medical technology before retreating from public life. Recent rumors of a mental breakdown after stepping back from his company. The articles painted a picture of a brilliant, driven man shattered by tragedy, who had vanished from public view months ago. And somehow, he had ended up injured in the woods behind her clinic. Maya set her phone down, staring out at the silhouettes of the mountains against the night sky. What was he really doing here? And more importantly, what would happen tomorrow? Upstairs, behind the closed door of her guest room, Ethan Blackwood lay awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight on his chest felt fractionally lighter. He had come to these mountains with no particular destination in mind, only the desperate need to escape the emptiness of his existence. He hadn't expected to find kindness from a stranger, a woman who saw him not as Ethan Blackwood, billionaire recluse, but simply as a human being in need of help. Maya Winters, with her steady hands and clear eyes, who spoke of small things worth living for as if they were treasures beyond price. Perhaps they were. It had been so long since Ethan had noticed such things, lost as he was in grief and guilt. As sleep finally began to claim him, Ethan wondered if perhaps his fall hadn't been the disaster it seemed. Maybe, in some strange way he couldn't yet understand, it had been the first step toward something else. Something he had stopped believing was possible. Morning arrived, with pale sunlight filtering through curtains Ethan didn't recognize. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the pain in his leg provided an unwelcome reminder, and the events of the previous day came flooding back. He had been reckless, hiking alone in unfamiliar territory, pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. Not that reason had been his companion lately. After 3 years of existing rather than living, something had finally snapped. He had walked away from everything. His company, his empty mansion, the remnants of his former life, with no destination in mind except away. The fall had been an accident, but in those first moments of pain and isolation, Ethan had considered simply staying where he was, letting nature take its course. Then some stubborn survival instinct had kicked in, and he had dragged himself toward what he hoped was civilization. Instead, he had found Maya Winters, a woman who spoke to him not with pity or awe, but with straightforward compassion and unexpected wisdom. The scent of coffee and something baking drew him from his thoughts. Moving carefully, wincing at the throbbing in his leg, Ethan managed to change into the clothes Maya had left for him. Worn jeans and a flannel shirt that must have belonged to her father. They fit well enough, though the sleeves were slightly short on his frame. Navigating the stairs proved challenging, but the promise of coffee was motivation enough. He found Maya in the kitchen, her back to him as she moved efficiently between counter and stove, humming softly to herself. Morning light streamed through large windows, illuminating the homey space. A fat orange cat watched proceedings from a cushioned window seat, its tail twitching occasionally. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice still rough with sleep. Maya turned, a spatula in one hand and a smile lighting her face. "You're up! How's the leg?" "Painful, but I'll live." Ethan eased himself onto a stool at the kitchen island. "Thanks to your care." "Let me check it after breakfast," Maya said, sliding a mug of coffee toward him. "Cream and sugar are on the table." "Black is fine," Ethan replied, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. The normalcy of the moment struck him with unexpected force. Sitting in a sunlit kitchen while someone cooked breakfast, exchanging morning pleasantries, as if they were old friends rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. When was the last time he had experienced something so ordinary, so fundamentally human? Before Caroline and Lily died, certainly, but even before the tragedy, his life had been one of isolation. Private jets and exclusive resorts, security teams and executive assistants managing his world. The empire he had built had become a gilded cage, separating him from experiences like this one. "Penny for your thoughts?" Maya asked, setting a plate in front of him. Golden pancakes, scrambled eggs, and crisp bacon. Ethan looked up, momentarily disoriented. "Sorry." "I was?" "This looks amazing." "Farm breakfast," Maya said with a shrug, taking the seat across from him with her own plate. "Can't start the day without proper fuel." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Maya spoke again. "I know who you are, by the way." Her tone was matter-of-fact, neither accusatory nor impressed. "I looked you up last night." Ethan tensed, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. "I see." "Don't worry," Maya continued, cutting a pancake with the side of her fork. "Your secret's safe with me. Though I'm curious what brings Ethan Blackwood, tech billionaire, to Pine Ridge. It's not exactly Silicon Valley." Ethan set down his fork, appetite suddenly diminished. "Does it matter?" "To me? Not particularly," Maya replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "You're still the same injured hiker I found in my woods, but it might matter to you depending on what you're running from or toward." The directness of her assessment was startling. Most people tiptoed around him, afraid to offend the powerful, the wealthy, the grieving. Maya Winters, it seemed, was not most people. "I don't know," Ethan admitted finally. "What I'm running toward, I mean. Away from is clearer. Expectations, memories, an empty house full of ghosts." Maya nodded, as if his answer made perfect sense. Sometimes away is direction enough for a while. "You're not going to tell me I need to face my demons? That running never solved anything?" Ethan couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Would it help if I did? Maya asked simply. When Ethan didn't answer, she continued, Besides, you didn't exactly run effectively. You ended up injured on my doorstep, which suggests the universe might have other plans. Despite himself, Ethan felt a smile tug at his lips. You believe in that sort of thing? Divine intervention? I believe life has a way of putting us where we need to be, even when it's not where we thought we were going. Maya rose, gathering their plates. Speaking of which, I need to check on my animals. Think you can manage to rest here for the day? Doctor's orders. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, Ethan, Maya said, her expression turning serious. Even when all the options seem impossible. Especially then. With that cryptic statement, she left him to his coffee and thoughts, the screen door banging gently behind her as she stepped out into the morning sun. From the kitchen window, Ethan watched as Maya moved through her world with confident purpose, checking on horses in the pasture, filling water troughs, disappearing into a small barn only to emerge minutes later with a self-satisfied expression that suggested problems solved. There was something compelling about her efficiency, her obvious contentment with this life she had built. It was so far removed from his own existence that it felt almost like watching a film about an alien world. Yet something about it called to him, awakened a hunger he hadn't realized he still possessed, for simplicity, for meaning, for connection to something beyond himself. When Maya returned, slightly windblown and carrying a basket of eggs, Ethan had made a decision. I'd like to stay another day, he said without preamble, if that's not imposing. Maya set down her basket, studying him with those clear eyes that seemed to see more than he intended to show. Your leg needs more rest, she said after a moment. And I could use some help around here while you recover. My usual farmhand is visiting his daughter in Charlotte this week. They both recognized the transparent excuse for what it was, a way to allow him to stay without either of them having to acknowledge the real reasons. Ethan nodded, relief washing through him. I'm not sure how much help I'll be with this leg, but I can try. We'll find ways to make you useful, Maya assured him with a smile that transformed her face, crinkling the corners of her eyes and revealing a dimple in her left cheek. Now, let me check that wound before I head to the clinic. As she carefully removed the bandage from his thigh, her touch professional but gentle, Ethan found himself studying her more carefully than he had the previous day. Maya Winters was not conventionally beautiful in the way his social circle defined beauty. No obvious cosmetic enhancements, no designer clothes or perfect blowout. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, showing freckles across her nose and the beginnings of fine lines around her eyes. Yet there was something arresting about her, a quiet confidence, a groundedness that he found himself responding to on a level he didn't fully understand. She radiated a sense of purpose, of being exactly where she belonged, doing what she was meant to do. When was the last time he had felt that way? The wound looks good, Maya pronounced, applying fresh antibiotic ointment. No signs of infection, you're healing well. Thanks to your care, Ethan said, meaning it. Maya glanced up, her hands pausing in their work. You know, for a billionaire tech genius, you're surprisingly tolerable. A startled laugh escaped him. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult. A bit of both, maybe, Maya admitted with a grin. I've found most wealthy people to be disappointingly self-absorbed. And I'm not? Oh, you definitely are, Maya said cheerfully, taping a fresh bandage in place. But there seems to be a decent human being underneath all that brooding billionaire angst. Ethan found himself speechless, caught between offense and amusement. No one spoke to him this way. Not his employees, not his board of directors, not even his few remaining friends. The honesty was as shocking as it was refreshing. I'll take that as a compliment then, he said finally. As you should. Maya stood, gathering her supplies. I need to get to the clinic. There's a casserole in the fridge you can heat for lunch. Books on the shelves if you get bored. Wi-Fi password is taped under the router in the study if you're having digital withdrawal. I've been off the grid for weeks, actually, Ethan admitted. It's been freeing. Maya raised an eyebrow. No one's looking for you? My assistant knows I'm alive. I check in weekly. Otherwise, I've made it clear I don't want to be found. The words sounded childish as he spoke them, a billionaire's tantrum against the world. "Everyone needs space sometimes," Maya said, surprising him with her lack of judgment. "Just make sure someone who cares about you knows you're okay." With that simple wisdom, she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the farmhouse with nothing but his thoughts and the ancient orange cat, who had decided the stranger was worthy of guarded attention from the doorway. "Just you and me, then," Ethan told the cat, who blinked slowly in response before turning and padding away, apparently unimpressed. Left to his own devices, Ethan explored the farmhouse as much as his injured leg would allow. The home told the story of Maya's life in a way no biography could. Photographs chronicling generations of her family, bookshelves filled with veterinary texts alongside well-worn novels, handmade quilts draped over furniture, and small treasures collected over a lifetime. A degree from NC State's veterinary program hung alongside ribbons from local fairs and a framed drawing of a horse, signed in a child's hand with a thank you note to Dr. Maya for saving Buttercup. In the study, he found more personal items. Photographs of a younger Maya with a dark-haired man, smiling widely at the camera or caught in candid moments of obvious happiness. Her fiancé, Ethan presumed, the one whose death had left her temporarily adrift. Yet she had rebuilt her life, found purpose again. Could he do the same? The question had haunted him for 3 years, since the night he had returned home from a business trip to find his world destroyed. His wife and 8-year-old daughter, victims of a home invasion gone horrifically wrong. The senseless randomness of it had been part of the unbearable pain. There was no reason, no purpose to their deaths, just terrible chance. He had responded by throwing himself into work, developing medical technologies that might save others even though they couldn't save his family. But the emptiness had only grown until finally he had simply walked away from everything, seeking, what, oblivion? Peace? He still wasn't sure. Yet here, in this simple farmhouse miles from his former life, something felt different. The crushing weight hadn't lifted entirely, but he could breathe a little easier, see a little clearer. Perhaps it was just the mountain air, or the forced rest his injury demanded. Or perhaps it was Maya herself, with her straightforward compassion and refusal to treat him as anything other than a person in need of help. By the time Maya returned that evening, Ethan had managed to prepare dinner, a simple pasta dish, using ingredients he'd found in her well-stocked pantry. It wasn't much, especially compared to the gourmet meals he was accustomed to, but the act of creating something with his hands had been unexpectedly satisfying. Maya's surprise was evident as she entered the kitchen to find the table set and food waiting. "You cooked," she said, hanging her jacket by the door. "Least I could do," Ethan replied, suddenly uncertain. "Though I should warn you, my culinary skills are limited at best." "It smells wonderful," Maya assured him, washing her hands at the sink. "And after a day of dealing with sick animals and worried owners, I'm grateful for any meal I don't have to cook myself." They settled at the table, and Ethan found himself anxiously awaiting her verdict as she took the first bite. "This is really good," Maya said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "Where did a tech billionaire learn to cook pasta?" "College, actually," Ethan admitted, "before the tech career took off. I was just a scholarship kid with 3 roommates and a need to eat something besides ramen." "Hard to imagine you as a struggling student," Maya commented, reaching for her water glass. "Sometimes it's hard for me to remember that version of myself, too," Ethan said quietly. "I think I liked him better, though." Maya studied him over the rim of her glass. "He's still in there, you know. People don't fundamentally change. They just get buried under layers of experience and expectation." The insight was surprisingly astute, and Ethan found himself nodding slowly. "Maybe that's part of why I left everything behind, to find out who's still there underneath it all." "And? Any discoveries so far?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I'm still figuring that out. But today, making dinner, it felt good to create something tangible, something useful. Most of my work is theoretical, abstract. I design systems that other people build, companies that other people run." "Must be strange living at such a remove from the real world," Maya observed. "It is," Ethan agreed. "Isolating in ways I didn't fully recognize until recently." The conversation flowed easily as they ate, ranging from Maya's most challenging cases at the clinic to Ethan's early days developing the medical technology that had made him wealthy. He found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years. College misadventures, early failures before his big breakthrough. The excitement of building something that could change lives. Maya was an attentive listener, asking insightful questions that suggested genuine interest rather than politeness. In turn, she shared her own experiences. The challenges of being a female veterinarian in a rural community, her love of mountain living despite its limitations, her close bond with parents who had trusted her to carry on the family legacy. "Do you ever regret staying?" Ethan asked, as they cleared the dishes together. "You could have practiced anywhere with your skills." Maya considered the question. "Sometimes I wonder about the road not taken," she admitted. "Especially after David died. It would have been easier to leave, start fresh somewhere without the memories." "Why didn't you?" "Partly because running away felt like another kind of giving up," Maya said, placing dishes in the sink. "And partly because this is home. These mountains, these people, they're part of who I am. Leaving wouldn't have erased the pain. It would have just added homesickness to grief." Ethan leaned against the counter, struck by the clarity of her perspective. "You make it sound so simple." "It wasn't," Maya assured him, turning to face him. "Nothing about grief is simple. But eventually I realized that building a new life didn't have to mean abandoning everything from the old one. Some things are worth keeping, worth fighting through the pain to hold on to." Her words resonated in a way Ethan hadn't expected, touching something buried deep beneath layers of grief and isolation. What had he kept from his life before? What had he valued enough to fight for? The answer was painfully clear. Nothing. He had retreated, withdrawn, allowed his world to shrink until it contained only work and memories, neither of which provided real sustenance for the soul. "What if there's nothing left worth fighting for?" he asked, the question emerging unbidden. Maya's expression softened. "There always is, Ethan. Sometimes we just need help seeing it." She reached out, briefly touching his arm, a simple human connection that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through him. "I should check your wound again before we call it a night." As Maya carefully changed the bandage on Ethan's leg, he found himself acutely aware of her gentle hands and the comfortable silence between them. The evening light filtered through the farmhouse windows, casting everything in a warm golden glow. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of peace washing over him. Not happiness exactly, but the absence of the constant hollow ache that had become his companion. "You're healing nicely," Maya said, securing the fresh bandage. "Keep this up and you'll be back to hiking in no time." "To fall down another ravine?" Ethan asked with a wry smile. "Preferably not," Maya replied, packing away her supplies. "Though if you hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation." "No, we wouldn't," Ethan agreed softly. The thought was unexpectedly unsettling. After Maya bid him good night, Ethan remained in the living room, staring into the small fire she had built to ward off the mountain chill. His company's board would be in panic mode by now, despite his assurances that he needed time away. The markets would be speculating about his absence, competitors circling like sharks. 3 years ago, these concerns would have consumed him. Now they seemed distant and strangely unimportant compared to the simple pleasure of cooking dinner for someone who expected nothing from him but his company. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sounds of life. Birds singing outside his window, the distant whinny of horses, Maya moving about downstairs. He dressed carefully in another set of borrowed clothes and made his way to the kitchen, determined to be useful despite his injury. "Good morning," he called, finding Maya at the stove scrambling eggs. "Can I help with anything?" She turned, surprise evident on her face. "You're up early. How's the leg?" "Better," Ethan said, which wasn't entirely a lie. The pain had dulled to a persistent throb, rather than the sharp agony of before. "I meant what I said about helping around here while I recover." Maya studied him for a moment, then nodded. "There's coffee in the pot. If you're serious about helping, you can feed Merlin and collect eggs from the henhouse after breakfast. Nothing strenuous that would tear your stitches." The simple domestic tasks might have seemed beneath the dignity of a tech billionaire, but Ethan embraced them with unexpected enthusiasm. There was something grounding about physical work. about accomplishing tangible tasks with clear beginnings and ends. By mid-morning, he had not only fed the ancient cat and collected eggs, but had also managed to repair a loose cabinet door in the kitchen that Maya had mentioned in passing. "You're handier than I expected," Maya commented when she discovered the fixed cabinet. "My father was a carpenter," Ethan said, surprised by how easily the long-buried memory surfaced. "Before he died when I was 12, he taught me the basics." "I didn't know that," Maya said, leaning against the counter. "It wasn't in any of the articles about you." "No, it wouldn't be," Ethan admitted. "The official Ethan Blackwood story begins with MIT and my first startup. The rest didn't fit the narrative." "The boy who became a billionaire," Maya mused, leaving out the part where he was human first. "Exactly." The insight struck Ethan forcefully. How much of himself had he sacrificed to become the person the world expected him to be? By the third day, they had fallen into an easy rhythm. Maya would head to the clinic in the mornings, leaving Ethan with a list of manageable tasks around the farm. He would prepare dinner before she returned, and they would spend evenings in conversation that ranged from the philosophical to the mundane. Ethan found himself sharing stories he had long kept private, about his father's early death, his mother's struggles to raise him alone, the drive that had pushed him to succeed at any cost. In turn, Maya opened up about her own life, the fiancé she had loved and lost, her dreams for the future of her practice, her deep connection to the land that had been in her family for generations. There was an authenticity to her that Ethan found increasingly compelling, a groundedness that seemed to anchor him whenever they were together. On the fourth morning, Ethan woke to the sound of rain drumming against the roof. The heavy downpour had transformed the landscape outside into a misty dreamscape, the mountains barely visible through the curtain of water. It was the kind of day that invited stillness, contemplation. He found Maya in the kitchen, already dressed in her clinic attire but looking out the window with a frown. "Everything okay?" he asked, reaching for the coffee pot. "Martin's Creek will be flooding with this rain," she said, gesturing toward the window. "The bridge to town might be underwater by noon." "Is that a common occurrence?" Maya nodded. "Few times a year. Usually means a day or two of being cut off until the water recedes." She turned to him with an apologetic smile. "I should try to get to the clinic before it happens. Some of my patients can't wait." "But you might be stuck here a bit longer than planned." The prospect of extended isolation with Maya didn't trouble Ethan in the least. "I'll be fine," he assured her. "Just be careful on the roads." "Always am," she replied, grabbing her raincoat and bag. "There's a generator in the barn if the power goes out. Instructions are taped to it." After she left, Ethan moved through his now familiar morning routine, feeding Merlin and checking on the horses, who seemed unperturbed by the weather. By mid-morning, the rain had intensified, beating against the windows with a fury that matched the strengthening wind. Ethan built a fire in the living room fireplace and settled in with one of Maya's books, a well-worn copy of Thoreau's Walden that seemed fitting given his current circumstances. Around noon, the phone rang, an old-fashioned landline that Maya kept for emergencies when cell service was unreliable. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Maya Winter's residence," he said, feeling strangely domestic. "Ethan?" Maya's voice came through, slightly staticky. "The bridge is already underwater. I'm staying at Jenny's place in town tonight. Will you be okay there alone?" "I'll be fine," he assured her. "Don't worry about me." "There's a list of emergency contacts on the fridge if anything happens," Maya continued. "And make sure to check the generator if the power goes." The line went dead mid-sentence. Ethan stood holding the silent receiver for a moment before replacing it. Alone in Maya's home, surrounded by her things, he felt a peculiar sense of responsibility, not just for the house and animals, but for maintaining the sanctuary she had created here. As predicted, the power failed mid-afternoon. Ethan pulled on a raincoat he found hanging by the door and made his way to the barn, where he managed to start the generator after only minimal confusion. The satisfaction of solving this practical problem, of keeping Maya's home functioning in her absence, was surprisingly powerful. By evening, the storm had become a genuine threat. Wind howled around the farmhouse, finding every crack and crevice to whistle through. Rain battered the windows relentlessly, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the darkness, followed by thunderous booms that made even Merlin, normally unflappable, seek refuge under the sofa. Ethan had just finished securing the shutters on the ground floor when a particularly violent gust of wind was followed by an ominous cracking sound from outside. Grabbing a flashlight, he peered through the window to see that one of the ancient oaks near the house had partially split, a massive limb now dangling precariously over the roof of the small barn where Maya kept feed and supplies for her animals. Without hesitation, Ethan pulled on the raincoat again and ventured out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he made his way to the barn, rain stinging his face and soaking through his clothes despite the protective gear. Inside, he quickly assessed the situation. If the limb fell, it could damage the roof severely, potentially destroying the winter feed for Maya's livestock. Working methodically despite the howling storm, Ethan relocated the most vulnerable supplies to a safer corner of the structure, then reinforced the threatened section of roof with spare lumber he found stacked against one wall. His injured leg protested the activity, but he ignored it, driven by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. By the time he finished, Ethan was soaked through and exhausted, but the barn was as secure as he could make it. As he trudged back to the house, lightning illuminated the property in stark relief, and he paused, struck by a sudden realization. He was fighting for something, not his company, not his wealth, but this small corner of the world that belonged to Maya Winters, a woman he had known less than a week, yet who had somehow awakened something long dormant within him. Back inside, Ethan stripped off his wet clothes and changed, then built up the fire against the growing chill. As he sat, watching the flames, Merlin cautiously emerged from his hiding place and, after careful consideration, jumped onto the sofa beside him. The cat regarded Ethan solemnly before settling against his thigh, a small gesture of acceptance that felt oddly significant. "Just you and me tonight, old man," Ethan told the cat, gently stroking his orange fur. "We'll keep things running until she gets back." The storm raged throughout the night, but Ethan found himself sleeping more soundly than he had in years, lulled by the rhythmic sound of rain and the knowledge that he had done what he could to protect Maya's home. When morning came, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter, though dark clouds still hung low over the mountains. Ethan made his rounds, checking for damage and ensuring the animals were safe and fed. The barn roof had held despite the dangling limb, which now rested partially on the reinforced section. It would need proper attention when the weather cleared, but his makeshift solution had prevented immediate disaster. By mid-morning, the landline rang again. "Ethan?" Maya's voice came through clearly this time. "How are things there?" "We weathered the storm," he replied, surprised by how good it felt to hear her voice. "Your barn roof needs some attention, but nothing catastrophic." "The barn roof?" Concern edged her tone. "What happened?" "Tree limbs split in the wind. I reinforced the threatened section before it could do serious damage." There was a pause before Maya spoke again. "You went out in that storm to secure my barn?" "It seemed like the right thing to do," Ethan said simply. Another pause, longer this time. "Thank you," Maya said finally, her voice soft. "The bridge is still underwater, but they're saying it should be passable by tomorrow morning. Will you be okay for one more night?" "Of course," Ethan assured her. "Merlin and I have reached an understanding. He's decided I'm acceptable company in your absence." Maya laughed, the sound warming him even through the phone line. "High praise from that old grouch. I'll see you tomorrow, then." After hanging up, Ethan stood for a moment in the quiet kitchen, a strange feeling settling over him. He would be leaving soon, returning to his life, his responsibilities, his emptiness. The thought was surprisingly painful. When had this farmhouse, this small slice of Maya's world, begun to feel more like home than any place he had lived in years? The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had never happened. Ethan was outside splitting wood for the fireplace, another task from Maya's list that his leg now allowed him to tackle. When her truck appeared on the long driveway, something in his chest lightened at the sight of her, and he set down the axe, wiping his brow as he walked to meet her. Maya emerged from the truck looking tired but relieved, her eyes immediately scanning her property for damage. When her gaze landed on Ethan, her face broke into a smile that transformed her features. "You're a sight for sore eyes," she said, closing the distance between them. How bad is it? Nothing that can't be fixed, Ethan assured her. The animals are fine, the house is intact, and I've already called a tree service about that limb. They'll be here tomorrow. Maya blinked in surprise. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, Ethan said simply. You've done so much for me. It seemed the least I could do in return. They walked the property together, Ethan pointing out the minor damage and the measures he had taken to address it. Maya listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or making suggestions, but mostly observing him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. What? He asked finally, when her gaze had lingered a bit too long. You're different, she said thoughtfully, from when I found you in the woods. Ethan considered this. I'm not in shock or suffering from blood loss, if that's what you mean. Maya shook her head. It's more than that. You move differently. Speak differently. Like you're more present. The observation was startlingly accurate. Ethan had noticed it himself, a growing sense of engagement with the world around him, a reconnection he hadn't realized he was missing until it began to return. Maybe I am, he acknowledged. Being here, doing practical things with my hands, having a purpose, however temporary, it's been good for me. Maya nodded, as if his answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Sometimes we need to strip everything away to remember who we really are. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Ethan found himself reluctant to broach the subject of leaving. His leg was healing well. The storm had passed. There was no logical reason for him to remain. I should head back soon, he said finally, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Maya turned to him, her expression unreadable in the fading light. Where will you go? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Back to his empty mansion? To the company that had become more burden than passion? To the life that had driven him to flee into the wilderness in the first place? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Not back to what I was doing before, I think. This time away has given me perspective. That's good, Maya said softly. Perspective is valuable. So is kindness, Ethan replied, meeting her gaze. What you did for me, Maya, taking in a stranger, caring for him, asking nothing in return, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? That connection matters. That purpose isn't found in accomplishment or acquisition, but in being useful, in making a difference, however small, in someone else's life. Ethan looked out at the darkening mountains. I built a company around developing medical technology that could save lives, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why it mattered. Maya was quiet for a long moment. The grief, she said finally. It has a way of consuming everything else. Yes, Ethan agreed, grateful for her understanding. After Caroline and Lily died, nothing seemed to matter anymore. My work became a distraction, not a mission. I was going through the motions without any real connection to what I was doing or why. And now? Maya asked, her voice gentle. Ethan turned to her, struck again by the clarity of her gaze, the way she seemed to see beyond his defenses to the truth beneath. Now I think I need to find a way back, not to what was, but to something new, something with meaning. The corner of Maya's mouth lifted in a small smile. That sounds like a good place to start. They sat in companionable silence as darkness settled fully over the mountains, stars appearing one by one in the clear night sky. Tomorrow Ethan would need to make decisions, take action, move forward. But for now, this moment of peace beside a woman who had reminded him what it meant to be fully human was enough. The next morning, Ethan woke early, a sense of resolve settling over him. He would return to his company, but with a new vision, redirecting its resources toward projects that served real needs, technologies that could reach those who needed them most rather than just those who could afford them. The fortune he had amassed could do genuine good in the world if he approached it with the right perspective. He found Maya in the kitchen, already dressed for work, a travel mug of coffee in her hand. I have surgeries scheduled all day, she explained, gathering her things. Will you be here when I get back? The question hung in the air between them, laden with meanings neither of them had yet articulated. Ethan hesitated, weighing his response carefully. I should start making arrangements to return, he said finally. My assistant has probably filed a missing persons report by now. Maya nodded, her expression carefully neutral. Of course, you have responsibilities. I do, Ethan agreed, but I'd like to come back, if that's all right with you. There's more I want to learn here. About farming? Maya asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. About living, Ethan replied seriously. You've shown me a different way of being in the world, Maya. One I'd like to explore further. Color rose in Maya's cheeks, but her gaze remained steady. Pine Ridge isn't exactly the center of the tech universe. Maybe that's part of its appeal, Ethan said with a small smile. Distance provides clarity. Maya studied him for a moment, as if assessing his sincerity. You're welcome to return, Ethan. Whenever you're ready. After she left, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his borrowed cell phone in hand. The call to his assistant was brief but seismic. Yes, he was alive and well. Yes, he was returning soon. And yes, things would be changing significantly when he did. The bewilderment in James's voice might have been comical under other circumstances, but Ethan understood the confusion. He was hardly recognizable to himself anymore. How could those who knew only the man he had been understand the transformation that had begun in these mountains? By the time Maya returned that evening, Ethan had arrangements in place. A car would arrive the next morning to take him to the private airfield where his jet waited. The mundane logistics of returning to his life felt surreal after days of simple farm tasks and quiet evenings by the fire. Everything set? Maya asked, finding him on the porch swing where they had spent so many hours in conversation. Yes, Ethan confirmed, making room for her beside him. I leave tomorrow morning. Maya nodded, settling beside him. Back to being Ethan Blackwood, tech billionaire. In name, perhaps, Ethan agreed, but not in the same way as before. They sat in silence for a while, the familiar creaking of the swing marking time between them. Ethan was acutely aware of Maya's presence beside him. The subtle scent of her shampoo, the way her hands rested loosely in her lap, the gentle rhythm of her breathing. Thank you, he said finally, the words inadequate for what he felt. For everything. Maya turned to him, her expression soft in the porch light. You're welcome, though I'm not sure I did anything extraordinary. You did, Ethan insisted. You treated me like a person, not a tragedy or a net worth. You showed me that life continues, that purpose can be found again, that connection is still possible. He hesitated, then added quietly, You made me want to try again. Something shifted in Maya's gaze, a vulnerability she rarely allowed to surface. I'm glad, she said simply. The world needs more people who are willing to try. Impulsively, Ethan reached for her hand, covering it with his own. Maya looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face, a question in her eyes that Ethan wasn't sure he could answer yet. I'd like to come back, he said again, his voice low. Not just to visit. To explore possibilities. What kind of possibilities? Maya asked, her tone carefully measured. Personal ones, Ethan admitted. I've been alone for a long time, Maya, longer than I realized. Being here with you has reminded me what it feels like to connect with someone, to care about tomorrow, to look forward rather than back. He paused, conscious of the weight of his next words. I'd like to see if there might be something between us worth pursuing. Maya was silent for a long moment, her hand still beneath his. You've been through a tremendous loss, she said finally. And you're in a period of transition. I wouldn't want to be just part of your healing process, Ethan. You're already part of it, Ethan acknowledged. But that's not all this is. At least, not for me. What is it then? Ethan considered the question carefully. A beginning, maybe, if you're willing. Maya withdrew her hand gently, but her expression remained open. I think we both need time, she said. You need to go back, face your world, make the changes you're contemplating, see if they feel right when you're there, not just here in this bubble we've created. The wisdom in her words was undeniable, even as disappointment settled in Ethan's chest. And then? A small smile touched Maya's lips. And then, if you still want to explore possibilities, you know where to find me. It wasn't the answer Ethan had hoped for, but he recognized the truth in it. What had grown between them in this short time was real, but fragile. A seedling that needed space and time to develop roots strong enough to withstand the complexities of their different worlds. "I'll come back," he promised, meeting her gaze steadily. "That's one thing I'm certain of." Maya's smile deepened, revealing the dimple that Ethan had come to find endearing. "I'll hold you to that, Ethan Blackwood." As they sat watching darkness settle over the mountains, a peaceful silence between them, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for what might come next, a sense that the future held possibilities worth exploring rather than just emptiness to be endured. It was a small shift, perhaps, but a profound one. The difference between merely existing and beginning, once again, to truly live. The sleek black car arrived precisely at 8 the following morning, its polished surface incongruous against the backdrop of Maya's rustic farmhouse. Ethan stood on the porch, his borrowed clothes replaced by the cleaned and mended hiking gear he'd arrived in. Maya stood beside him, arms crossed against the morning chill, her expression carefully neutral. "Your chariot awaits," she said, nodding toward the car where a driver stood attentively by the open rear door. "Hardly a chariot," Ethan replied with a small smile. "Just transportation." "Back to your real life." "A different part of my life," Ethan corrected gently. "This was real too, Maya." She met his gaze then, her eyes reflecting the same complex mix of emotions he felt. Regret at the parting, uncertainty about what might come next, and beneath it all, a fragile hope neither of them was quite ready to name. "Safe travels, Ethan," she said simply, offering her hand. Instead of shaking it, Ethan clasped it between both of his, holding it for a moment longer than necessary. "I meant what I said. I'll be back." Maya nodded, withdrawing her hand slowly. "I'll be here." The finality of the goodbye hung between them, neither willing to complicate it with promises or expectations. Ethan shouldered his small bag and walked to the waiting car, turning once to wave before ducking inside. As the vehicle pulled away, he watched through the rear window as Maya's figure grew smaller, standing straight and still on the porch until the car rounded a bend and she disappeared from view. The transition back to his former life was jarring. From the moment the private jet touched down, Ethan found himself immersed in the trappings of wealth and power he had once taken for granted. The deferential staff, the luxury vehicles, the frictionless movement through spaces designed to accommodate his status. His mansion, when he finally returned to it, felt cavernous and sterile after the warm confines of Maya's farmhouse. James, his personal assistant for the past 5 years, hovered anxiously as Ethan moved through the vast living room, taking in the expensive minimalist decor with new eyes. "The board has been calling hourly," James reported, tablet in hand. "And Mr. Chen from Vortex Medical has made 3 offers to buy your controlling interest in the past month alone. The latest is quite generous considering the market uncertainty created by your absence." "I'm not selling," Ethan said, his voice echoing slightly in the open space. "And I'll meet with the board tomorrow. Today, I need to reacclimate." James nodded, though concern remained etched on his features. "Of course, sir. Will you be needing anything else this evening?" Ethan glanced around the immaculate space, suddenly aware of its emptiness. No books left casually on side tables, no mismatched mugs in the kitchen, no ancient cat judging him from the window seat, no Maya. "No, James. That will be all. Thank you." After his assistant departed, Ethan wandered through the house that had once been a family home, now just an elegant mausoleum to what he had lost. Caroline's tasteful touches remained throughout, the artwork she had selected, the furniture she had chosen. In the 3 years since her death, he had changed nothing, as if preserving the space might somehow keep her memory intact. He paused at the closed door to Lily's room, his hand resting on the knob. He hadn't entered this space since the funeral, couldn't bear to see the bedroom frozen in time. The stuffed animals arranged on the bed, the half-finished art project on the small desk, the bookshelf filled with stories they had read together. Now, drawing a deep breath, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was exactly as he remembered, preserved like a museum exhibit. Dust motes danced in the shaft of evening sunlight that penetrated the partially drawn curtains. Ethan moved slowly to the bed, sitting carefully on its edge as he had done countless times when Lily was alive, reading bedtime stories, discussing her day at school, comforting her after nightmares. Grief washed over him, fresh and raw, but different somehow. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully feel the loss without being consumed by it, to acknowledge the gaping hole in his life while recognizing that he still existed around its edges. Lily and Caroline were gone, a fact that would never change, never stop hurting, but he remained, and with that existence came responsibility, not just to their memory, but to himself and what he might yet become. Something Maya had said resonated in his mind. Building a new life didn't have to mean abandoning everything from the old one. Some things are worth keeping, worth fighting through the pain to hold on to. What had he been holding on to? Not the joy or the love or the purpose that had defined his family life, but the pain of its loss, as if grief were the only appropriate tribute to what had been taken from him. Perhaps there was another way to honor them, not through stasis and suffering, but through growth and renewal, through directing his resources toward creating the kind of world Lily might have flourished in, the kind of meaningful impact Caroline had always encouraged him to pursue. The next morning, Ethan entered the Blackwood Innovations headquarters for the first time in months, dressed not in his usual bespoke suit but in simple slacks and a button-down shirt, closer to what he had worn at Maya's farm than to his former CEO uniform. The receptionist's eyes widened in surprise as he crossed the lobby, employees stopping mid-conversation to stare as he passed. The boardroom fell silent when he entered, 12 faces turning toward him with expressions ranging from relief to concern to barely concealed resentment. Ethan, Victor Chen, the most senior board member, recovered first. "Welcome back. We weren't sure you'd received our messages about this meeting." "I received them," Ethan confirmed, taking his place at the head of the table. "I've been reassessing priorities." What followed was one of the most challenging meetings of Ethan's career. The board, while respectful of his personal tragedy, was less understanding of his subsequent abandonment of responsibilities. They presented charts showing stock depreciation, development delays, and competitor advancements during his absence. They outlined the damage control measures they had implemented and the public narrative they had crafted to explain his extended, quote, sabbatical. Ethan listened quietly, absorbing their concerns without defensiveness. When they finished, he leaned forward, hands clasped on the polished table surface. "I understand your frustration," he began. "And I appreciate the efforts you've made to stabilize the company during my absence. I wasn't in a position to lead effectively, and I recognize the difficulties that created." Relief visibly swept through the room. Their CEO was being reasonable, accepting responsibility, presumably ready to return to the status quo. "However," Ethan continued, "my time away has provided clarity about the direction Blackwood Innovation should take moving forward. Our focus on high-end medical technology has been profitable, but it has also limited our impact to those who can afford cutting-edge care." Confusion replaced relief as board members exchanged glances. Victor Chen leaned forward, his expression cautious. "What exactly are you proposing, Ethan?" "A realignment of our priorities," Ethan replied. "I want to establish a new division focused specifically on developing affordable versions of our proprietary technologies for underserved communities, rural hospitals, developing nations, emergency response systems." The reaction was immediate and predictably negative. Board members cited profit margins, shareholder expectations, resource limitations, and competitive pressures. Ethan listened to each objection, noting their concerns without yielding his position. "I understand the financial implications," he said when they had exhausted their arguments. "That's why I'm prepared to fund this initiative personally if necessary. But I believe we can integrate it into our existing structure without sacrificing overall profitability." "This sounds more like a charity than a business strategy," remarked Sandra Lowell, their chief financial officer. "It's both," Ethan acknowledged. "And it's non-negotiable. As majority shareholder, I'm prepared to move forward with or without board approval, though I'd prefer to have your support." The message was clear. Ethan wasn't asking permission. He was setting a new course. By the meeting's end, a tentative agreement had been reached. Ethan would develop a detailed proposal for the new division, including funding structures and integration plans, while the board would explore potential partnerships to mitigate risks. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan threw himself into the work with an energy and focus he hadn't felt in years. The challenge of reimagining his company's mission while maintaining its financial viability engaged his mind fully, requiring the kind of innovative thinking that had made him successful in the first place. He assembled a small team of like-minded employees, moved his office from the executive floor to be closer to the research division, and began reaching out to organizations with experience in deploying medical technology in resource-limited settings. Each evening, he returned to his empty mansion, increasingly aware of the disconnect between his evolving purpose and the sterile environment that surrounded him. Gradually, he began making changes, donating Caroline's designer clothes to charity, repainting rooms in warmer colors, bringing home books that had caught his interest, not erasing the past, but making space for a different future. At night, his thoughts inevitably turned to Maya, to her practical wisdom, her unpretentious strength, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. He wondered what she would think of his plans for the company, how she might approach the challenges he faced. Several times, he picked up his phone to call her, only to set it down again. He had promised to return when he was ready, when the changes he contemplated had taken root. That time hadn't yet arrived. Instead, he channeled his energy into meaningful action. He established a foundation in Lily's name to support children's access to health care, using a portion of his personal fortune to fund it independently from the company. He reconnected with old friends he had neglected during his years of grief-fueled isolation, finding that many welcomed his return to their lives with genuine warmth. Most significantly, he began therapy, something he had resisted since the tragedy, believing his pain was simply the price of love lost. Now he recognized that healing wasn't a betrayal of those he had lost, but a necessary step toward honoring what they had meant to him and what he might still contribute to the world. 6 weeks after leaving Pine Ridge, Ethan sat in his office late one evening, reviewing projections for the new rural healthcare initiative. The proposal was nearly complete, comprehensive enough to address the board's concerns while remaining true to his vision. It represented not just a business pivot, but a personal transformation, from success defined by wealth accumulation to success measured by lives improved. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. James entered, carrying a small package. "This arrived for you, sir," he said, placing it on the desk. "Hand delivered to the security gate." Ethan glanced at the plain brown paper wrapping, no return address visible. "Thank you, James. That will be all for tonight." After his assistant departed, Ethan examined the package more closely. The handwriting on the address label was unfamiliar, but distinctly feminine, precise cursive letters spelling his name and the office address. Curiosity piqued. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a mason jar filled with what appeared to be homemade peach preserves, and a simple note card bearing a brief message. "In case you're missing Southern comforts." Ethan stared at the jar, a smile spreading slowly across his face. Maya. She had reached out across the distance, not with demands or questions, but with this simple gesture of connection, a reminder of shared moments and private jokes about peach cobbler. Without hesitation, he reached for his phone and dialed the number he had memorized but not yet used. It rang 3 times before her voice came through, slightly breathless. "Hello? You sent me peach preserves," Ethan said, not bothering with conventional greetings. A soft laugh came through the line. "I did. My grandmother's recipe, as promised." "How did you find me?" "Contrary to what you might think, you're not that hard to locate," Maya replied, a smile evident in her voice. "Your company website has an address, and apparently dropping your name at the security gate works wonders." Ethan leaned back in his chair, something tight in his chest easing at the sound of her voice. "I've been meaning to call." "But you were waiting until you had everything figured out," Maya guessed. "Something like that," Ethan admitted. "How did you know?" "Because I know a bit about rebuilding," Maya said simply. "It doesn't happen overnight." A comfortable silence settled between them, thousands of miles reduced to nothing by the connection that had formed in those few days on her farm. "How are you, Maya?" Ethan asked finally, realizing how much he had missed speaking her name. "I'm good," she replied, busy with the clinic. "We had a bit of excitement last week when Mrs. Peterson's prize bull decided to take a tour of Main Street." Ethan laughed, picturing the scene in the small town he had glimpsed only briefly. "I'm sorry I missed that. It'll probably happen again," Maya assured him. "Pine Ridge isn't big on rapid change." Another pause, weighted with unasked questions. "And you?" Maya ventured. "How's the return to civilization treating you?" "It's evolving," Ethan said carefully. "I'm making changes, both personally and professionally. Good ones, I think." "I'm glad to hear it," Maya said, and he could hear the genuine warmth in her voice. "I miss your farm," Ethan admitted suddenly. "The quiet, the purpose, the simplicity." He hesitated, then added softly, "I miss you." The confession hung in the air between them, honest in its vulnerability. "The farm misses you too," Maya replied after a moment. "Merlin has been positively sulking since you left. Turns out he prefers male attention." "Just the cat?" Ethan asked, heart beating a little faster. A soft exhale came through the line. "Not just the cat," Maya acknowledged quietly. The admission, simple as it was, filled Ethan with unexpected joy. They weren't declarations of love or promises of forever, but in their gentle honesty, these words felt more meaningful than grand romantic gestures. "I meant what I said about coming back," Ethan told her. "I just needed to put some things in order first." "I know," Maya assured him. "There's no rush, Ethan. Some things can't be forced." "No," he agreed, "but they can be nurtured, given the right conditions to grow." The conversation shifted then to lighter topics. Developments at her clinic, progress with his new initiatives, small daily victories and challenges. They spoke with the easy familiarity of old friends, yet with the heightened awareness of something new and fragile developing between them. When they finally said goodnight, Ethan sat for a long time staring at the jar of peach preserves. Such a simple gift, yet it had bridged the gap he had been afraid to cross, offering connection without pressure, acknowledgement without demand. The next morning, Ethan called his project team together for an announcement. The Rural Healthcare Initiative would begin with a pilot program in several underserved communities across Appalachia, including Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The decision made perfect business sense. The region's isolated geography and limited medical infrastructure presented precisely the challenges their technologies needed to address. If they could succeed there, they could succeed anywhere. That it would also bring him back to Maya's doorstep was a personal benefit he chose not to articulate to his team. Over the following 2 weeks, Ethan finalized arrangements with local healthcare providers in the target communities, secured board approval for the pilot program, and prepared for an extended stay in the field to personally oversee the initial implementation. When questioned about the unusual hands-on approach from a CEO, he simply stated that understanding the real-world context was essential to developing effective solutions. The night before his departure, Ethan stood in Lily's room, which no longer remained frozen in time. While her favorite stuffed animals and books still occupied their places, the space had been gently transformed. Photographs that had been hidden away now hung on walls, celebrating her life rather than enshrining her absence. A comfortable reading chair had replaced the small desk, creating a space where Ethan could sit surrounded by memories without being paralyzed by them. "I'm trying," he said softly to the empty room, to the daughter who would never grow up, to the wife who would never grow old beside him. "I think you'd both want that." No miraculous sign answered him, no sudden sense of their presence. But as he turned to leave, the weight of grief felt different. Still present, still permanent, but no longer all-consuming. Like a physical wound that had finally begun to heal, leaving a scar that would always mark him but no longer defined him. The next morning, as his private jet prepared for takeoff, Ethan sent a simple text to Maya, coming back to Pine Ridge. Business this time, but hoping for pleasure too. Her reply arrived moments later. "Merlin says it's about time. I'm inclined to agree." As the plane lifted into the clear blue sky, Ethan felt a sensation he had almost forgotten, anticipation untainted by dread. A future with possibilities worth exploring, a heart beginning to remember how to hope. He was returning to Pine Ridge not as a broken man seeking escape, but as someone in the process of becoming whole again, still scarred, still learning, but alive in ways that mattered. And this time, when he saw Maya Winters, he wouldn't be a stranger in need of rescue, but a man ready to offer himself fully to whatever might grow between them. Two healers who had found in each other not just the comfort of shared pain, but the promise of shared joy. The mountains came into view below, familiar now in their ancient, enduring beauty. Somewhere among them, a small farm waited, and a woman who had unknowingly changed the course of his life with simple kindness and uncompromising truth. Ethan smiled as the plane began its descent. He was coming home. Not to the place he had been born, but to the place where he had begun to live again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.